So one of the things I'm thinking about today is that I may not have survived last week if I had lived in the 1700s. You may or may not have noticed there were a few fewer videos popping up over the last week and definitely fewer responses to your comments, and that's because I was pretty sick and I'm still healing. So it started with what I thought was a kidney stone. Annoying and painful, yes, but after 4 days it seemed to have left my body and I was much happier for it. 2 days later, I started feeling similar pain. I thought it was another stone. But over the course of another 36 hours, my body had weakened to the point I was barely able to stand without holding myself up on something. That little stone, that initial one, because the second one wasn't, that initial one did big damage as it made its way through my system. It led to a urinary tract infection that moved into my bladder and into a kidney infection. Now, modern medicine is a marvel. Some IV medication and at-home medications, and I'm already feeling much better, obviously. But I'm not 100%, but much better. But here's the truth I keep thinking about. If this were the 1700s, I probably wouldn't be around to tell any more stories. It's not melodramatic, though. That's history. So let's talk about it. In the colonial era, nobody knew what a UTI was. They didn't know what bacteria were. They didn't know why people suddenly burned with fever or cried when they tried to go to the bathroom or curled up with stabbing pain in their sides. They only knew the symptoms. They knew heat of the kidney, a suppression of urine, and one they called putrid fever. We'll get to that. They had no cure because they didn't have a clue. So, if I had shown up in 1775 complaining of the first symptoms I had last week, I would have been told to drink some barley water, to rest and wrap my stomach in warm wool, avoid spices, strong emotions, or cold air. But as the infection grew stronger, they'd still have no idea what was happening or why. The moment the infection hit my bladder, the point when today doctors' face gets a little serious and the antibiotics get stronger, that was the moment in the 1700s when the danger became real. They would have said my body's humors were overheated. They would have probably bled me to cool the inflammation, leeched me to draw off the heat, and dosed me with mercury, perhaps, to purge the corruption. Every one of those treatments would have just made me weaker, dehydrated, feverish, and more vulnerable. And still, the infection would keep climbing. Now, this is where my story, today, took the scary turn, but in the 1700s, it's where it may have ended. Once the infection gets into the kidneys, they would have called it an inflammation of the kidney, or a putrid fever. Symptoms they described match exactly what I felt. Violent chills, stabbing back pain, nausea, the feeling of being hit from every direction, and crushing fatigue. But they had no treatment for it, none. They didn't have antibiotics, they didn't have IV fluids, no ability to stop the infection once it spread. Back then, an infection like I had, one that spread into the organ like the kidneys, survival was not good. Since there were no detailed medical reports of these specific infections, as they didn't know what to call them, historians can only look back at the medical documents they can find and try to guess which ones were and what the survival rate was. Most estimate it was maybe 50-50. Many say it was less than 50%. Doctors wrote that the patient often looked as if sinking, drifting in and out of fevered dreams, and then slipping into what they called putrid fever, what we now understand as sepsis. At that point, they often wrote, beyond the reach of physic, meaning there's nothing left to be done. Now, I'm still recovering, I'm tired, still on the other side of something that hit a little harder than I expected. And every time I take one of those antibiotics, I keep thinking about this. If I had lived in the world I'm studying, the 1770s, this infection would have likely been the end of my story. And that's the part that hits. I'm very grateful that I'm here now. I'm tired healing, but I'm here, thanks to medicine they couldn't have imagined. And please be patient with me, but I am catching up, and this week's videos will be coming out over the next few days.